Issa. Okay, Issa? Yes. Issa Galloway.
Issa Galloway defines the mission.
Kind of a show that will put people on the edge of their seat.
Because it leads to the future, with a more sophisticated approach.
What's up, everyone? I have to talk to you about the anti-Muslim sentiment that's rising all across the nation, all across the world, because of one Zohran Mandani. Now, I have to admit, I was wrong about him. I was wrong about Zohran because my major take was that his real relevance was exposing Americans to ranked choice voting. And while, of course, I still think ranked choice voting is an essential tool to help restore democracy in this nation, Zohran has so far exceeded any expectations I've had of him, both for his message strategy and masterful communication techniques, but also because he has over and over and over again, and even on things I disagree with him about, stood firm by what he stands for, his core values of his campaign. Yeah, around the edges on issues about Israel-Palestine, he's kind of waffled a bit and, moved himself to the center. And that's to be expected for everyone who's kind of intolerant of that. If he's going to be the mayor for all New Yorkers, he has to work with the police. He has to work with everyone, and he has to represent everyone. And he's been doing a good job showing that he's willing to do that. But what he's been doing an amazing job is messaging about anti-Muslim hate. So without further ado, let's get into the clip of the video that has gone so viral, where he finishes it saying, "I choose to stand in the light." But let's get to the part that shows how he deals with anti-Muslim hatred and humanizing Muslims. So without further ado, let's check this out.
I thought that if I could build a campaign of universality, I could define myself as the leader I aspire to be, one representing every New Yorker, no matter their skin color or religion.
Now, remember that, because the attacks coming on him, he's clearly saying, I want to represent and work for everyone.
I thought if I worked hard enough, it would allow me to be that leader. And I thought that if I behaved well enough or bit my tongue enough in the face of racist, baseless attacks while returning back to my central message, it would allow me to be more than just my faith.
Do you see how he's talking about you can't be the model minority when people hate you for no reason? This is beautiful.
I was wrong. No amount of redirection is ever enough. In doing this, I have told the wide-eyed young boy in Jackson Heights or the first-time voter in Parkchester that they too should remain in the shadows. I am becoming that same uncle who took me aside. No more. The dream of every Muslim is simply to be treated the same as any other New Yorker.
It's as clear as it gets. But when you see the attacks coming in response to this video, he's asking to be equal. But watch how they frame it. They call it dominance and taking over, when he clearly said, treat us the same as anyone else.
And yet for too long, we have been told to ask for less than that and to be satisfied with whatever little we receive. No more. For as long as we have lived, we have known that no matter what anyone says, there are still certain forms of hate acceptable in this city today. Islamophobia is not seen as inexcusable.
Now, this is the brilliant part. He introduces the term Islamophobia, and then in the framing of how it's not seen as inexcusable, meaning it's a weak term. It's brilliant what he's doing, because so many people on the right actually weaponize the term Islamophobia and say things like, I'm proud to be Islamophobic and all this other stuff, so that they can normalize its usage. And also, the problem with the term Islamophobia is it doesn't humanize Muslims. It puts the word Islam in the mind of the hater and of the public. So then anything they want to throw against the Muslim community, they can have this plausible deniability by saying radical jihadists are the religion of Islam, and they try to separate, their bigotry from being directly aimed at people by trying to use this two-step and saying it's aimed at this faith, when we all know the net effect of what they're doing is dehumanizing and threatening Muslims in America.
One can incite violence against our mosques and know that condemnation will never come. Elected officials in this city can sell T-shirts calling for my deportation without fear of any accountability. The consequences are stark. More than 1 million Muslim New Yorkers exist in this city only to be made to feel as if guests in our own home. No more. We stand on the precipice of an election, but that is not what today is about. We know that in less than 2 weeks, we will say goodbye to a disgraced former governor and our current indicted mayor.
This is a money statement right here, because he's owning his opposition by just spitting facts about who they are and their problems. And he does it so quickly and confidently while making another point. But it also strengthens the point he's about to make, because he's talking about the facts of who these people are, disgraced and under indictment, yet they're the ones attacking him.
The bigger question is whether we are willing to say goodbye to something much larger. It is whether we are willing to say goodbye to anti-Muslim sentiment that has grown so endemic in our city that when we hear it, we know not whether the words were said by a Republican or by a Democrat.
Here's the beautiful part. He changes from Islamophobia being a weak term that is not inexcusable, meaning that it's allowed, to the term, or the phrase, anti-Muslim sentiment. And here he mentions how when we hear it, it's not from one side or the other. It's coming both from Republicans and Democrats. So he's calling out both sides of the political spectrum for normalizing the hatred against Muslims. This is genius, and it's also humanizing, because he's talking about how people are made to be feeling, and also the actual effects of normalizing that hate on people, because he mentioned firebombing mosques and other examples. This is one of the most fantastic speeches I've seen in response to being targeted for his faith that any person in America has given for being targeted on their faith.
We know only that it was spoken in the language of the politics of this city. In an era of ever-diminishing bipartisanship, Islamophobia has emerged as one of the few areas of agreement. And while I appreciate all who have rushed to my defense over the past 2 days, I think of those Muslims in this city who do not have the luxury of being the Democratic nominee, who do not have the luxury of being deemed worthy of solidarity. While my opponents in this race have brought this hatred to the forefront, this is just a glimpse into what so many Muslims have had to endure every day across the 5 boroughs that we call home.
Not just the 5 boroughs that New Yorkers call home, but that Muslims across America, Muslims in the West in general, have had to endure. Now, you know the rest of the speech. It ends on a beautiful note, but because I have so much ground to cover, we're going to move to how none of this is actually by accident. And in fact, Dropsite News had dropped the leaked documents that show the nation of Israel panicking because their own research shows that they're considered a genocidal apartheid country abroad. Means that they hired a PR firm, several PR firms, to conduct a massive study on how to rehabilitate the nation of Israel's interests and reputation, especially in Europe and in North America. Now, this is the leaked part here, but a deeper dive at Marketing Interactive gets into a backlash over the PR ethics that were used to create this. Now, I don't want to focus on that. What I want to focus on is right here, where the presentation also recommended, and this is it, the notion of radical jihadism being universally effective for conservative audiences. Now, that's not an accident, because they understand that the youth in large are critical of what Israel did during the genocide in Gaza, and have now started to see Israel with a jaundiced sight because of their actions. Not because of anti-Semitism, not because of Jew hatred, but because of what Israel has done to the Palestinians, live streamed in 4K for 2 years. Now, what they're doing to counteract that, though, is the report said, connecting radical jihadism, which is dog whistle for trying to say that all Muslims who follow Islam and who are faithful are basically going to be considered radicals. And you're going to see that in the people that I'm going to show you in a minute. So connecting radical jihadism to a desire to dominate other religions was an effective communications means. Now, you're going to see this time and time again throughout the rest of this video. But don't let this get out of your head. A desire to dominate other religions was effective as a communications means. So here we go. Laura Loomer. She is an anti-Muslim loon. But she writes here, in the final stretch of his campaign, Zohran Mandani finally admits the purpose of his campaign to be the mayor of New York City, and that is to advance the presence of Muslims in America. He literally just said he wants to be the mayor for everyone, regardless of their faith. And then he went on to say quite clearly, we want to be treated the same as every other New Yorker. But here he says, here Laura says, Muslims will never be treated the same as every other American, and they never should be, because by practicing Islam, they are inherently un-American. You can't practice Sharia law and also be an American. We need less Muslims in America, not more. In fact, Islam should be banned in America. So straight from loony Laura Loomer's mouth to the right wing. And you might put her off as just kind of a shock jock pundit, someone who's just crazy, doesn't have too much influence. But she does have a direct line to the president. And here's something she just put out recently on Twitter, which is kind of shocking in that it's such a bringing back of old issues. She uses this senator to introduce an old trope about Muslim takeover. In fact, I had to deal with this in Tennessee. There was a state senator named Senator Ketron, and he freaked out in Tennessee trying to claim that Muslims were claiming ownership over the state capitol in Tennessee because of a wudu, or a purification sink. Muslims wash for spiritual purity before prayers. And it was just a mop sink. I mean, even Stephen Colbert on the Colbert Report did a huge segment on it that was just hilarious, calling out the ridiculousness of it. The other thing is, when I first moved to Tennessee, I went and took a picture in the Capitol of that mop sink, just because of how crazy the situation was. But now listen to how they're reviving two old things here. Muslims practicing their faith as somehow a claim over land or some way of establishing or dominating other faiths, and then tying that to Sharia law so that any person who's a Muslim who actually dares say their prayers then becomes a radical jihadist trying to dominate other faiths. Check it out.
I think it's really horrible what happened to your staffer today, but it's just shocking. Before you go, perhaps you can just, confirm just very briefly. I know you have to go right now, but you guys saw women dressed in niqab. The only thing you can see were their eyes through the little slits, and your staffers saw these men praying on the floor of the Senate and washing their feet in the bathroom.
Yeah, they were using the bathroom for a opportunity to prepare for their prayer.
Shocking. Imagine, where else are they going to do it?
And I don't know how they do it in the Muslim countries, but since they have been coming to the United States of America, they stop traffic, they get in Times Square, they do everything they possibly can to showcase what they're doing and who they are. That's the reason they have no fear. And, it's like how they treat women. It's absolutely embarrassing that we would allow some kind of cult like this to come to our country to treat women like this. And for some reason, the far left Democrats, they stand up for these people. And again, if you come here, go by our Constitution, do things right, try to assimilate, I'm fine.
Try to assimilate, I'm fine with that. Remember the assimilation thing, because we're going to show how, no, they're not fine with anyone who's assimilating. And also, they do a lot of rules for thee, but not for me. Now, this senator also just did this.
Mr. President, I come to the floor today to talk about one of the greatest threats facing our country today, Islamic extremism.
Notice how he can't pronounce it. I think he knows he's full of it because he keeps stumbling on his words. Watch the second.
24 years ago, September 11th, 2001, nearly 3,000 innocent Americans were murdered in a coordinated terrorist attack carried out by radical Islamic extremism. So
he goes on and introduces a motion to ban Sharia. Now, this is also throwback tactics, but you see how he ties it directly to the attack on our nation of September 11th. And this is exactly like how they're tying Zohran Mandani's candidacy to September 11th, to fearmonger, to make Zohran, even though he's clearly stating what his values are, what his race is all about, and that he doesn't want to be treated different than any other New Yorker, and that he also wants to represent every New Yorker of faith or no faith. But they're using these things to fearmonger. So let's keep going, because the examples just don't quit. And in fact, here is Representative Randy Fine. Now, this is a guy who literally said, "Let them starve," when he was asked about the children in Gaza under the Israeli blockade. Morbidly obese guy, pretty disgusting. But let's see what he has to say about Islam and the Muslim community with another guy who later on in this segment actually admits how he's been fear-mongering and hate-mongering about Muslims for decades.
Your thoughts to this, because I know you got into this with Mehdi Hassan, who's liberal guy, is obviously Muslim, and he basically came out there and said that that this is like church bells. This is no different than a cathedral ringing its bells to mark mass or to mark time. What say you?
So what they're talking about is in Minnesota, the allowance of the call to prayer to be done at earlier and later times based on revoking some previous sound restrictions. Now, I don't know what happened in Minnesota. What I do know is that most of the time, hard right Republicans are always talking about local control and how, states' rights and local groups shouldn't be infringed upon by the larger entities. But here, when it's Muslims, they don't like it. All of a sudden, they have no concern for local control, states' rights, or city versus state, or in this case, federal commentary against a city and a municipality making up their own minds for their own people.
Well, I don't remember a lot of bells being rung at 3:30 in the morning. Look, the fact of the matter is mainstream Islam has not come to America to integrate. It has come to America to conquer. And
now, again, we mentioned how the previous senator was talking about, if you assimilate, I'm fine with that. Now, here comes Randy Fine to say mainstream Islam. So this isn't just radical Muslims anymore or radical jihadism like the PR study was showing. This is actually mainstream Islam comes to dominate, not to integrate, is what he just said.
The call to prayer is exactly that. It is intended to intimidate. It is intended to threaten. It is intended to make demands of people.
Now, first off, the call to prayer isn't any of those things. It's literally the call to prayer. It's to call Muslims to the mosque to pray. That's it.
Church bells have no words. They're just sort of beautiful ringing. And again, I don't remember hearing them at 3:30 in the morning. So folks like Hassan have to understand America is not a Muslim nation. And if they want to be part of a Muslim nation, they ought to move to the 50 plus Muslim countries that there are.
Now, I talk about this a lot, and I've been talking about it for years. I used to be on KBC in LA, and
yeah, so we know you talk about it a lot, buddy, and we know that you're an anti-Muslim hater. Now, here is another clip that just goes further on what these people are trying to do to fearmonger about the Muslim community. And again, this is all coordinated based on that PR study and the recommendations on pro-Israeli interests. So those of you who want to put America first, who want to put Americans first, who want to see our country restore the First Amendment, our civil liberties, the Bill of Rights. These are people who are the wolves in sheep's clothing, who are trying to pretend like they want those things while they're singling out groups of Americans and fear-mongering about them.
Real quick, on the subject, and you've brought him up a couple times, I've been talking and warning about Mamdani for a while. Why should every American, whether they live in Florida or they live in Nevada or any state outside of New York City, be concerned with Mr. Mamdani's what seems to be his meteoric political rise and his likely ascent to the mayor's mansion there in New York?
Well, people should be concerned because he is.
Rep. Fine keeps blabbering on about this. They can't help but tell the truth sometimes. And the meteoric rise and the ascending to the mayor, this is only showing the popularity of Zohran Mamdani, and that's why they're freaked out. But the framing here is, why should everybody in America be scared about what happens in New York? And that was just like the exact same framing about a town in Minnesota that has a municipality that allows for some limited number of spaces to do the call to prayer. And they're again using that to talk about Islamic conquest. Now, let's just think about this logically for a second. Muslims are less than 2% of the population. So if you're so fragile and you're so insecure about American checks and balances and about the rule of law and about the 98% of people who are not Muslims being somehow subverted by 2% of the society, then you've got a lot more issues to deal with your own patriotism and your own understanding of American life than worrying about Muslims. But let's hear this guy out, because he's again going to bamboozle a lot of people because fear is something easy to sell.
He's a communist jihadist who seeks the destruction of the United States. And people
So he just called the soon-to-be mayor, Zohran Mandani, a communist jihadist. First off, while communism isn't exclusively anti-religious, most implementations of it have been atheistic, at best favoring it, and most of the time very hostile to religion. So this is a contradiction in terms. But he's trying to do that because he wants to tie Muslims to radical leftists to fit a narrative.
People should be concerned because that will start with our greatest city, New York. They should be concerned because we can see how this movie ends. We can look at what is now the United Islamic Kingdom. And
so this is also throwback. And a lot of people used to get burned for trying to talk about, like when London had a Muslim mayor, and then all of a sudden they're declaring that all of England is now an Islamic state, which is what Redefining is doing here. It's ridiculous, it's ugly, it's gross, but it's fear-mongering of the highest order, but it's also BS. So we're going to let him blather on for a little bit longer. But let's just take note of how one person who is proud of his Muslim identity, but is running on helping the everyday workers, the everyday low-income people, the working class in New York City afford to live there, how much of a threat that is to the establishment. But also keep remembering that PR study and how all of this fits those recommendations to the T.
Amazing country that had created so much culture and so much beauty that has now fallen to Islam and is no longer the country that it once was. We're only a few years behind. And frankly, there are not many places left where the conquest has not taken place. Make no mistake, if you watch videos of imams in mosques across the country, they do not hide what their intention is.
Now, he's going to go on to say that mosques across the country are having imams who are telling everyone that we're here to take over. Well, I would love for the vast majority of Americans to tap into the live streams of the mosques, because most masajid, that's plural of mosques in Arabic, actually stream the Friday sermons. And you're going to be surprised because it's almost always about how to be more faithful, how to be a great neighbor, how to spend your money ethically, how to treat your family better, how to live a life of meaning, how to connect with your spirituality and worship God in a more pure way, how to do introspection, and to call out your own hypocrisy, and on and on and on. Again, I know the mosque that I'm a part of streams their sermons to Facebook. You can check it out. And that's probably true for the vast majority of mosques across the United States. But fine, knowing that most people won't do that, thinks he can pull the wool over your eyes and then tell people that we're this giant group of people like the Borg from Star Trek, just of one singular mind, no diversity of thought, no diversity. First off, do I look like a typical Muslim? No. And most people, what does a typical Muslim even look like? So this fear-mongering is ridiculous, and it's just the ugliest thing. And the thing about it is, Redefining, as a proud Jewish person, should know better, because the people who hate Muslims are the same people who hate Jews. And by fear-mongering against one community, he's empowering the same people that are going to do hate crimes against the Jewish community. But he doesn't care because he's not about anti-Semitism. He's not about empowering his own people. He's about serving the nation of Israel. So let's go on because we're going to see more examples of that along the way. Now, speaking of that, and you remember the whole thing about assimilation? Well, here is the ADL National Executive Director, Jonathan Greenblatt, speaking to the Jewish community on a conservative channel. Let's see what he has to say about assimilation.
Is it your sense that Jewish people are getting complacent, that they're not engaging to degrees and levels we should be?
I have met a lot of October 8th Jews for whom the massacre on October 7th was a wake-up call. I've met a lot of people who feel much more galvanized, much more organized. But that will only be sustained if we offer them, ways to participate in a real and robust way in Jewish life.
Mm-hmm. And whose responsibility is that? And
all of ours. Yeah. But this is why we need a revolution in our community on so many levels.
Well, up until here, I'm all for it. If you're Jewish, be more Jewish, embrace your tradition, learn your religion, practice your religion, but watch where he takes it, because it's a pretty sharp turn from embracing who you are, deepening your spirituality, learning about your faith. Check out what he says now.
So look, the reality is that intermarriage rates continue to go up. Assimilation continues apace.
He just talked about assimilation of Jews into the larger society in a negative way. But Jonathan Greenblatt is not at all immune to hypocrisy. Let's see what he has to say here when asked about what the definition of genocide is. Now, remember, the ADL is an organization that wants to have never again a genocide of the Jewish people, a Holocaust against the Jewish people. And as it was taught to me before the genocide in Gaza, that never again meant never again for anyone. That's why a lot of the Holocaust museums have the Rwandan genocide exhibits and other mass killings of people, like the Armenian genocide, in the Holocaust museums, because originally never again meant never again for anyone. But let's hear what Jonathan has to say when he's asked about the definition of genocide. And I don't buy for a minute that someone who's been a decade-long leader of the Anti-Defamation League hasn't thought about and doesn't know the definition of genocide.
I don't think it's a genocide because that's a legal definition, which means an intentional effort. And I don't have the dictionary in front of me.
I have it here. It says,
okay, what does it say?
It's a UN, right? We should say it's a legal definition. And it says any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group, such as killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or part, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group.
Before he reacts, look over his shoulder. There's a book there that says, "It could happen here." What's the it that could happen here in that book? Pretty sure he's talking about genocide or about massive hate against the Jewish community.
Well, so in fairness, I don't have that definition in front of me, right? And I haven't read it like you have before this.
She just read it to you. And it's a pretty universal definition.
But what I'll simply say is that I don't believe the Israeli government is committing genocide.
So he just doesn't believe it, even when confronted with the definition. He doesn't address any of the points. Let's just move on. I don't believe it. Now, let's take another instance from this same interview to hear more from Greenblatt.
These questions on the words that one uses are at the heart of what I hear many people asking about this war, including Jews, which is, how can they support Zionism if this is the current manifestation of Zionism?
Well, look, it's like, how can you support Islam if Ayatollah Khomeini is the progenitor of it? How can you support Christianity if the Crusades happened? How can you?
So, do you see what he's doing? He's talking about Zionism, which how you want to define it can vary from person to person. But where Greenblatt defined it earlier in the interview is that Jewish people should have self-determination and a free, safe place to exist and be protected, which, yeah, sure, no worries. But he's equating that, a political philosophy, with entire religions, Islam and Christianity. And then, true to that same playbook from the beginning of this video, true to the idea of talking about domination of other faiths, he's using the worst examples. The Ayatollah, so Shia Islam is a minority of the Muslim community, and he's using that because Iran sounds scary, and that's part of the testing they did. And then he talks about the Crusades for Christianity. So these are false equivalencies that he's giving, but he gives more. It gets worse.
Support America if you disagree with President Trump's policies.
So now the president versus Zionism.
Or even in the face of larger scale disasters like slavery. So again, Zionism is the right of a people to self-determination. You can be upset with the policies of a government. But again, if you didn't say in the wake of enslavement of Africans, America should be destroyed. If you didn't say in the wake of the Crusades, Christianity has no legitimacy.
And I don't think he thinks this is, I'm not sure he understands what he's doing here. Because by comparing the enslavement of Africans in America to the genocide happening in Gaza, he's actually revealing quite a lot. And then also talking about the Crusades and conquest of Jerusalem and the Middle East by Christian invaders to the genocide in Palestine. I'm not sure he gets what he's actually saying. But, we used to think that the ADL was a very strong civil liberties organization and civil rights organization, and in their mission, and I have to say this, and I know a lot of Muslims are going to come at me for this, but the ADL at the local level has done a lot of great work for a ton of people, not just for Jews, and for Muslims too. Now, there's always been, somewhat of a compromise and a price that comes with that because, they're always there trying to protect and advance the cause of Israel. But in the history of the United States, especially since post-September 11th, a lot of the local chapters have done great work for a lot of people. That doesn't mean that the national chapter, and especially under Greenblatt's current leadership, that it's not jacked up. And he's about to keep going. So let's go.
If you don't say in the wake of the oppression of women for centuries, Islam has no right, then...
Again, defining Islam in these negative terms. This is the examples he's giving to justify Zionism. And it's straight from the playbook that we saw from that PR
Why
study.
would you feel differently about this? Again,
I'm only trying to I'm trying to characterize, I think.
So there's that. And we already saw how he doesn't believe in assimilation. Well, let's get to this video.
This candidate has visited churches and mosques, not a single synagogue. This candidate has gone to Harlem to meet the Black community, Washington Heights to meet the Latino community, Chinatown to meet the Asian American community. Not once to a Jewish neighborhood.
The last poll I saw is something like 32 or 33%.
Yeah, the audio.
So doesn't believe the polls is what he says after that. But let's get back to, he just said literally he hasn't visited a single synagogue or spent any time with the Jewish community. Well, on that very same show, a couple days later, let's see what they report.
We had a conversation with Jonathan Greenblatt from ADL earlier this week, where he made a comment that I just think is worth clarifying on the air, because he had officially said at one point, and sort of made a point of saying, that Zohran Mandani had not met with any mainstream Jewish institutions, and that was sort of.
He said he hadn't gone to any synagogue.
As we talked about this, and he was effectively trying to criticize Mandani. The truth is, and I didn't know this in the moment, but he had actually visited a whole number of synagogues, and you can go back and look. He attended Shabbat services in Park Slope. He met with the UJA Federation. He met with a number of temples in the spring. Now, Jonathan Greenblatt, who I actually went back and forth with about this afterwards, suggested that what he meant to say was that Zohran Mandani has not met with Jewish organizations after the primary.
So what he meant to say magically is very different than what he actually said with boldness the first time around. So Greenblatt is attacking Mamdani as part of the strategy to fear-monger about Islam and Muslims in order to benefit and to rehabilitate the nation of Israel's reputation, because that's what the PR study showed, and it's a distraction. It's to say, hey, we know we did some terrible stuff, but what about these people who are worse than us or who are a threat to you? And it's all lies, and it's set up literally to harm our community in order to rehabilitate a foreign nation's status. But it doesn't stop here. And it's not just coming from Greenblatt. It's coming from prominent New Yorkers like Eric Adams. Let's see what he had to say, because he's furthering this domination narrative.
To come together New York can't be Europe, folks. I don't know what is wrong with people. You see what's playing out in other countries because of Islamic extremism. Not Muslims. Let's not mix this up. But those Islamic extremisms that are burning churches in Nigeria.
So we can't become Europe, but then he jumps to Nigeria.
That are destroying communities in Germany, that have taken over the logical thinkings. And that's what I'm fighting for.
Yeah, he's fighting for the logical thinkings. Good job, buddy. Now, we're going to spend some time in this video because you're going to see how people try to excuse and normalize what Adams and Cuomo have been saying. So let's get into this because it gets ugly real fast.
In the final days of the race for the New York City mayor, Andrew Cuomo is stirring up fears about his rival Zohran Mamdani by seeming to suggest that the frontrunner would cheer on another terrorist attack on New York City.
Any given morning, there's a crisis. And people's lives are at stake. God forbid another 9/11. Can you imagine Mandani in the seat?
Yeah, I could. He'd be cheering.
Well, it's another problem. But can you imagine that?
No. You heard Cuomo laugh. You heard him just say, yeah, that's another problem. Now let's look at what this apologist tries to pull.
No, listen.
Mandani was in the seat on 9/11.
Yeah.
What would have happened in the seat?
The Democratic Socialist candidate was quick to denounce his opponent's remarks.
We're speaking about a former governor who, in his final moments in public life, is engaging in rhetoric that is not only Islamophobic, not only racist, it's also disgusting, and is his final closing argument with less than 2 weeks before Election Day.
His final moments in public life. That was quite the dig, Ashley. But I mean, look, this is getting predictably very nasty, and specifically along these lines of.
Now, I'm kind of upset with her because this whole predictably very nasty, what she's doing here is normalizing it. It's like when Hillary Clinton said racist stuff about Obama in their deal. None of that stuff, first off, should be predictably or acceptable to the American public. But, I mean, we should demand better of our elected officials. But here, what she's doing is whitewashing this whole anti-Muslim sentiment and hatred towards just electoral politics. And that goes exactly against what Mamdani said in the opening video for this, of how the city, and I'll say the whole country, and in fact, I'll say major parts of Europe and North America, have normalized and refused to ostracize anti-Muslim hatred. But let's hear what they have to say and then see what the detractor does to try to justify Cuomo's statements.
Mamdani's faith.
Yeah, I mean, it's disappointing. Actually, I'm really disappointed that it wasn't like, okay, that's a bridge too far. It's similar to like when John McCain, when the person was like, he's not a citizen. It's like at some point you have to have the integrity to say stop, especially in this moment that we find ourselves where we're talking about taking the temperature down. Look, if Cuomo's probably going to lose this race. Like, I don't see how he doesn't. And if he wants to attack Mamdani for not having experience for some of his positions, that's fine. But to engage in now he didn't say it, but he didn't say it was unacceptable. To engage in that it is disgusting. And I say it as Cuomo, even though he's running as an independent, as him being a Democrat.
Well, he was talking about his experience. I mean, if you watch the debate last night, most of Cuomo's best moments were about Mamdani's experience. In this particular case, I think he was making 2 points, actually. One is, if you did, God forbid, have a massive emergency like that, would you really want someone in the mayor's seat who has never had a job, never run anything, certainly never run anything at this level?
Yeah.
And that's been his entire argument, number one. Number two, it is true that Mamdani was taking a picture with an unindicted co-conspirator from the World Trade Center bombing the other day and called him a pillar of the community.
Now, what this guy's doing, first off, he's whitewashing the laughing and the agreement of cheering on September 11th.
Cuomo didn't make him take that picture. Mamdani took that picture and seems to be pretty proud of it. That's a legitimate thing to debate. But I think in this case of the radio show,
yeah, it is a legitimate thing to debate because Imam Siraj al-Hajj in this picture was, I think, the first imam to give an invocation either in the New York Assembly or maybe it was the U.S. Congress. I'd have to double check that. I'll put the actual fact across the screen in the edit and the resources in the description. But also, that whole unindicted co-conspirator label has been debated and taken to task over and over and over again because it was an innovation to ensnare people and fearmonger about Muslim leaders in post 9/11 America. And you can look this up, and I'll put links in the description. It has been roundly debunked and is just used as a smear on people's name.
I wanted to ask you about this Brooklyn imam who, for years, even before the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, in which he was accused of being an unindicted co-conspirator.
This imam is very radical, very fundamentalist. He was not actually a co-conspirator. He was named by the government as a possible co-conspirator at the beginning, I think, of the second trial having to do with the first World Trade Center bombing in 1993. He was never indicted. He was never actually a conspirator.
Now, we're going to get into the final couple of videos so we can make a couple of points. One, I want to return to when Zohran mentioned anti-Muslim sentiment instead of Islamophobia to humanize Muslims. Now, this is something I might have to cut out of this because Paramount is really big on copyright, but I think this can be under fair use because it is a fantastic point and directly relevant to what we're talking about, the term Islamophobia. So, comedian Rami Youssef with a Jewish comedian, Jon Stewart.
It is so wild, though. You know, there's all these things, and Islamophobia and anti-Semitism are such brethren.
Now, Islamophobia and anti-Semitism are such brethren. Jon Stewart knows what he's doing here because it's true that people who hate Muslims also hate Jews. And that's why he's saying they're brethren. But let's see what Rami says because he makes an amazing point about the term Islamophobia.
In like different moments, you know?
Yeah, but we got like a really bad end with our, like, Islamophobia is so weak. Like, it just sounds like, well, yeah, because it's like arachnophobia or like what, it just sounds like, oh yeah, you had a weird Islamic experience as a kid, huh? You got a little Islamophobia.
You don't like flying or Muslims?
No, but no, you can get over it. Just like try some halal meat. And then like you'll get over, like, you know, like Islamophobia, it's like a shellfish allergy. It's like, oh yeah, no, like, no, he doesn't want any. He has Islamophobia. Like, it sounds so benign. Anti-Semitism is like, whoa, like, dude, like what? You know what are you on about? You know, so I think even from just on a real word language level, we're at an incredible disadvantage.
I never thought of it that way.
Yeah. And that's because you're Islamophobic.
Now, I've been saying this forever. I hate the term Islamophobia. I think it has a place in academia, but as a civil rights tool, Rami nails it. It's terrible. But let's see another comedian who's also incredibly smart, and let's see his take on it. This is Samuel Bade.
And it's ridiculous. You can't just let people continue doing this because they're making Islamophobia just so like casual and normal. I don't even like using the term Islamophobia because it's like it's inaccurate and it's like, ooh, I like that. Hey, let me get the fist bump too. Come on, man. Jeez. It is. Yeah, it is. Anti-Muslim terrorism. I like that. Yes, we're not germ. Yes. I feel like this became a town hall meeting.
So, yeah, the term is terrible. Comedians are making the point better than I ever could. But I want to close off on the people who hate us and what that looks like. Because we already saw how the Zionist leaders, when they're talking in their own community, aren't great on assimilation, interfaith marriage, and yada, yada. But the fear-mongering of Muslims suppressing and dominating others falls right in line with what President Trump said was very good people on both sides years ago in his first term. So there you have it. You will not replace us, and blood and soil. Nazi slogans, great replacement theory, plays right into the hands of this idea that Muslims and Islam want to dominate other faiths. All lies, all incredibly dangerous, all done, I think especially right now, after that leaked PR study and document and series of recommendations for foreign interests, tearing apart America, and just like the right in the wake of the murder and tragic killing of Charlie Kirk. They called it statistical terrorism or stocratic terrorism. I forget the term. But essentially the idea is that if you do enough dog whistling and you have plausible deniability, that people, when they hear it, get radicalized and will act on it. And as we've seen, an increase on anti-Semitic attacks against synagogues, against Jewish people. We've seen the same thing of anti-Muslim hate spiking and incidents crossing across the country. Both our communities are at risk, and the stoking of anti-Muslim sentiment is also going to horseshoe into hurting Jewish people and rising anti-Semitism. We have to fight both. We have to work together with people who put Americans and human beings first and make never again really mean never again for anyone. So with that, I want to thank you for your time, and let me know in the comments what I got wrong, what you disagree with, and please subscribe, share this video with your friends, help me reach more people, because the message and the things we talk about are real and real important, and we need to learn from the good examples and the bad examples showcased in today's video. God bless you all. Peace.
Issa. Okay. Issa? Yes. Issa Galloway.
Issa Galloway.
Issa Galloway.
Issa Galloway.
Issa Galloway, convert to Islam, defines the mission.
Kind of a show that will put people on the edge of their seat.
Because it leads to the future, the more sophisticated approach.